signed up or Mr. signed up or something. So
Yes, I'll be glad to. Do you want me to read the passage today?
yeah, would you be up for it?
Sure, sure.
Okay, all right. Is that okay with you, Yane?
Sure, yeah.
What page do we start on today?
I will look at the book to let you know, and when we get to that portion, unless you already know, Raphael.
So when we get started, you'll tell me.
Yeah, I'm dropping now the link to the live stream in our chat for anybody who wants to share it. And I'm going to share it.
If I recall correctly, I think it may have been 172. So anybody can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
That sounds about right to me.
Anybody want to lead the workout? Lead the facilitation of the discourse? Any other volunteers? All right.
All right, I've posted the live, and so I was on my page. Did anybody say that they did want to lead the workout or the facilitation?
Other people being a little shy right now, so
okay.
It's all good.
All right, so I will lead. I see that Tone is still connecting to audio. But we can just go ahead and get started. And then we can talk through how we're going to end this while we are in our cool down, if that's okay. So I am going to pull up the timer. And so I'm going to lead the workout today. I'm going to start with warm-ups and lead from the warm-ups right into jumping jacks. I hope everybody has some water with them, so when we finish, we can all get hydrated, because that's super important. And I think, you know, these are our last couple of days, so we should really want to do some, get it in a little bit, right? So what's it say here? Oh, awesome. Okay, so Medusa's going to facilitate. All right, so what after Suzanne reads, then Medusa will facilitate the discussion, right? All right, sounds good. So let's get cracking. And it's interestingly enough, my first song will be Medusa's track. So I'm going to share my screen. Where is that screen? Here we go. All right, y'all can see the timer?
Yep.
All right. Oh, and let me make sure y'all can hear the sound. All right, so we're gonna get started. So we're gonna start some exercises, starting with neck rolls. Some warm up neck rolls.
The revolution will not be televised. The revolution you be muting, I'm cooking up a solution. I'm ready to get the shooting. I'm ready to spark this movement. That speed, it get the bump in my head. It get the thumping, got me thinking about something. Freedom that's on my mind and got me reaching out something. When my teeth stop showing and that heat stop flowing, I'm rock this mic tonight. I grab the mic, it's like I'm Dolomite. Overseeing your coke the bacon soda, cause they wanna give us 3 strikes. And they wanna take a nigga's life. Well, send them babies off to college with them crack dollars. Black and Impalas, trapping the black fathers, trapping to feed their daughters, but they lack knowledge. They not aware, Section 8 never wanted them there. And they babies on welfare. It's like a twisted game of truth or dare. I never promised to repeat them on the proof is there. True repair come from reparation. Black Medusa trying to save the nation. Sing. Don't look at me like that.
Lean forward. Bring a long round to the right. Back. Left. Forward. To the second
Like
time.
I mean, I declare war. Pawnees, fake ass outlaws. My Jamaican said it's seen it before.
Forward.
Burn Babylon, yo, burn
Back
Babylon and then settle the
Shake
score.
it out
I
a
am
little.
tiara, no tiara, it's a
Now we're
metaphor.
gonna move forward
Here
and go the
remember
other
so
way.
black good luck. I kill his beat just like a
Forward.
savage dog. I like a mad
Left.
God in Dallas, spitting rhymes galore.
Back.
Encore, you should beg for more. I said America stage, y'all shook to see
Forward
me
a
good
second
today.
time.
Strange looks, I'm reading books and ancient
Left.
niggas slaves. Bound for glory,
Back.
better freedom reign. I sing the songs
Right.
that my granny
You
sang.
go right
The
down
miners
into
don't
a
that
press.
stand in my way. I detonate
Press
like a
down,
napalm. No
down.
chest, face gone. John Travolta, the way I face off.
Go
Usain
down.
Bolt, the way I take off. You should be afraid of what I don't say, but what I can do. Unite, Chris and Pyros, documented in your Bible. The first shall be last and the last shall be
Alright,
given.
then we're gonna go up, go right into our
But on these papers just to
Let's
get the
go.
paper. Mass incarceration just to re-enslave us. Reincarnated, I'm a new nigga. Same gun, it's a new trigger. So my enemies are slew quicker. If you knew, then you do different. Black Medusa on a new mission. Sing. Don't look at me like that. You don't know what you see. You
We're gonna go for an extra 12 seconds.
Racism preceded slavery or slavery preceded racism. I ask myself, is this you or is this me? Is that
Keep
hatred
going.
deep-seated for Dion? Or is it something that you just came up with? Is it something that you noticed when you decided that you were superior? When you decided that I was inferior? When you decided that my royalty wasn't good enough for you?
All right.
Just come up with when you saw how good
My fill started.
or is it something that you came up with when you saw
All right, now I'm gonna reset to 1 minute. We're gonna go. That was Black Red Medusa. All right, we're gonna go from there to we're gonna run. Let's do Marcus Garvey Hugh.
Everything I do.
Actually, since yesterday was Garvey's birthday, right?
Right.
So we didn't recognize that,
Distance.
but we
Isn't
can
it clear that the best
we can
memories
get
don't
into it
happen
now.
miles apart? They
remember.
happen when we're all
So
together.
we're gonna start, and when we get to the 1 minute mark, start the run.
Malcolm Garvey Huey, study
Dedicated to
Malcolm
all
Garvey
political
Huey.
prisoners.
Their life was like a movie, study Malcolm Garvey
Yeah.
Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey.
It's Gates the
Malcolm
Grill,
Garvey
Gates the
Huey.
Grill,
Their life was like a movie.
Free
I
Mumia.
live, I die, I organize. Everything I do's revolutionize. I build what's good for the whole damn hood. Study G's like these, really think you should. I study Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey. Marcel Cody with the Uzi. Listening to Fela Kuti. I'm Ogun with the machete. Especially if it's deli. Got the Santos for the Hexy to protect me, so respect me. This is heavy, legendary, revolutionary. My wifey, she resurrect me when they thought they had me buried. Took me out the cemetery, now it's family over every. Cause it's all that's necessary to avoid the commissary. I'ma live for you 5, so I stop getting high. If you know, then you recognize it's that black and brown pride. This the power of the mind, RBG, God divine. You can see through the lies if you could read between the lines.
I live, I die, I organize. Everything I do,
Right.
revolutionize. I
What's good for the whole damn hood?
I love that song.
G's like these
All right, so
really
we're gonna go next. Crunches. We're gonna do push-ups. All right. So we're going to both floor exercises back to back.
By the door so you can say I'm acting spooky. Just like in the movie, son, you better pack your toolie. Niggas wish be acting fruity, you'll be cracking like they
Alright,
kooky.
so I'm just gonna
Rather
put
smoke a doobie than be
2 minutes.
burning and looting. Bang, bang, pig shooting. We should
So
blame
what?
Rudy Julie.
When we get
Yanny
to
for
the
the
first
camera shine that white
minute,
and
we're
nose
down to 1
candy.
minute,
Let you
and
banging
we'll
on the
swap
system.
around.
You
What's
a
1
gangster
minute?
wearing
Yeah,
panties.
fine.
RBG, my family from the
We're gonna
Bronx
do
to
crunches
Miami.
now.
Police cannot stand me, Pacquiao like a Manny. Call me Little Bobby Hutton, cause I'm
Alright.
first to push the button. Rappers don't be saying nothing to the system, we say fuck them. This is for the Honda, mama, see mama Akua. All the real OGs, I'm a soldier, cause you told me study Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey, I'm reporting in the duty.
Sticky, icky, yours truly here for duty. Don Davino, M.A. Uno, you know how we drop the jury. This is real, not a movie, not Mickey, Donald, Goofy. I'm a soldier, I avoid a bitch nigga like the cooties.
School face in a hoodie.
Fresh pair of khakis, we could do this like we fam or go to war like the Apaches. For whatever, I stay ready. I learned that in Tallahassee. Babatunde used to school me as a juvie, skipping classes. Never let the system use me. My duty is my passage. Watch the homies in your army. They don't always show their badges. Keep your family living healthy. Teach your children about their blackness. Teach your wifey how to use the ratchet. This shit is classic. Get your food, clothes, and shelter. Fuck the system, pimp it backwards. I ain't hating. I'm just saying if you wanna be a rapper, study
Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey, study Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey, study Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey, study Malcolm
Alright.
Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey.
A tactical approach is designed to get certain.
All right, so we are going to end with push-ups. And I think we can do our push-ups to a little Black Girl Magic. Hey. All right. All right, when we get down to the 1 minute mark, let's go.
Oh, Brogadabra, here I come. Magic bitch styling. Move like magic at challenge. Poof, you need reminding. Getting round and losing shop. Uma, when she back again. You will never end the rain. We keep multiplying. Running through the evidence. There's just no denying. Some be baba different shot. It just keep on shining. Who that lady got some lip? From my mama got the gift. We just pour some peace in it. At least we keep on trying. Hold on my youth. Hold on my youth. I told you I was coming. I gave you for warning. For I'm just for one man. Hold on my youth. Hold on my youth. I told you I was coming. I gave you for warning. I can stand your black girl magic.
Right.
I can feel it.
Anybody else hot?
It's so strong, it's like a magnet. You would think that I see you. I can stand your black girl magic.
And in the burn. Thank you, Yane.
Ready?
It's so
I
strong,
was-
it's like a magnet.
Let's,
You would think
and I gotta
yeah, my yeah
Okay,
told me in
15.
a dream I was conscious.
So,
No, I was not woke, I
just
was
feel
like
like,
in a
you know,
concert. And I
I know
spent
I'm
my
not the
voice, I was
that's
choked
been
and
getting
belittled.
stronger
Then I
through
was
this
already part
medication.
two as the sheep.
Let's have some
No, I'm
water.
not your voice, I just wanna be
We need
equal.
to infuse-
Gotta stand tall, we the ones, we the people. Look me in the eyes, this the cards you've been dealt. I don't need your table, I can shit by
break.
myself. Poof.
I've been black since 93. But I understand that it's not just about me. Understand that there's a spirit underneath this skin. Understand that there's a soul that lives within. Soul, glow, from dusk till dawn. From the beginning where we all come from. So somebody tell me why we can't get along. I wrote this psychosis for sisters like me, with skin as dark as the night that shines so effortlessly. I wrote this for my sister, who looks in the mirror and calls out to beauty, who can no longer see her. No one can describe who you are, but you are who you are. Who you are. Who are you? Magic. Black. Magic.
Then let's take it back again, back to Africa. Matriarchy is a fate, black women per capita. I Capitan, you remain my queen. I saw it in my mother when I saw it in a dream. Holy Spirit, how is she? You disrespect the womb, where life all come from, and it is to whom your praise is to, or your race is to. Did she like the la sharper, then kudos to you. Nah, hold on my youth, hold on my youth. I told you I was coming. I gave you warning, for I'm just for one man.
All right, y'all. So we're going to now shift to the reading. And the reading is going to be led today by Suzanne. And then the follow-up discussion will be facilitated by Medusa. Just wanted to, right before we get started, throw out that we have 2 more days of reading, and then we will be finished, therefore, after tomorrow. So on the 20th, wanted to suggest that we use that session to unpack the lessons of the book and how we might actually translate those lessons into our active organizing, to leave with some plan for how to do that. And that instead of having the teach-in on the 21st, that we use that time on the 20th, because there's actually another event being organized here in Philly at the location we were thinking we wanted to have a teach-in. And instead of going and finding another location and being in competition, we thought it would be a better approach for us to go and be in support of what they're doing and be in community and collaboration. And so, especially since we'll be finishing a day early, we can use the time on the 20th, on Friday, to actually do much of what we would have been aiming to do on the 21st. And at the same time, you guys can just think about it, and you can let us know tomorrow, but we're thinking that we maybe could extend the session on the 20th to be a 2-hour session, but we could do a 1 hour or a 2 hour. We can decide that together collectively. So y'all think about it, and we'll talk about that, make a final decision about that tomorrow, but I'll have the time blocked out for myself in the event that people think that that's what they would like to do. And with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over. We didn't even do introductions this time, did we? We've been doing it so long that I'm like, we all know each other, but let's quickly do introductions. I'll start with myself. I'm Yane Indigo. I'm here in so-called Philadelphia, part of Lenape territory. I want to give a second to my comrade Raphael to introduce himself.
On the move, free the land, folks. I'm here in Onondaga territory, stolen territory called Rochester, New York. Activist, youth advocate, freedom fighter. So glad to be here, and I really appreciate this space for community.
And then I want to just acknowledge our brother Ikemba, who has been here, was very dedicated and was coming even while he was ill. But we did really encourage him to take care of himself, even if he didn't work out and he was just here to listen, and try to contribute, his ideas. The mental work is also work, and it can fatigue you. And so we wanted to encourage him to really allow himself to fully rest and just give his body what it needs at every moment that it needs it, so that he can become, fully recovered. But we want to continue to send our love and appreciation to him. Want to also just give space for our co-facilitators for today to introduce themselves very quickly, just name, pronoun, and location. So Suzanne, can you introduce yourself? Suzanne will be our reader.
Sure, I'm Suzanne, she, her, we, and I'm in New York City.
Awesome. And then Medusa, will you introduce yourself? Medusa will be facilitating the discussion after the read.
Medusa, they, them, and Philly, Lenape, and yeah.
Dope. All right. So now turning it over to Suzanne for the read.
So you were going to tell me what page, from what page to what page?
We'll be reading from page 172, right? Wasn't that right?
Yeah, at the bottom, I think, with a little more patience, I think that's where she may have stopped, Crystal. And anybody, if there's any differences, please let us know, because we're trying to keep up ourselves. But that's where I think we were at, 172.
172 to go to where? To when?
182.
Okay. All right. Ready?
Actually, I think we'll go a little bit further because there are a lot of blank pages in there.
Oh,
Yeah, so yeah, 172 is correct. And then can go to I think 185 or the top of 186.
that sounds about right.
Okay.
That sounds about right, yeah.
All right. So here we go. Brother Jackson, Brother George. With a little more patience and sacrifice, Stalin could have eventually marched to the Atlantic. With all of Europe in ruins and German economy already in the final stages of disintegration, with the US presence in Europe, capitalism could be dead today. Instead, US imperialism rose to behemoth proportions. After the war, international markets opened in Europe, Africa, and Asia with the flea market of radios, TVs, and novelties here at its center. For the sake of these trinkets and baubles, the labor elites diffused the righteous demands of the people. Consensus politics formed as a result of their defection simply solidified the totalitarian regime with all the opinion molding facilities under the ruling classes. Elections and political parties have no significance when all serious contenders for political office are fascist, and the electorate is thoroughly misled about the true nature of the candidates. Let me just put on my glasses. One cannot say all the people who vote are unaware, just as one cannot say the 1,200 professors who backed Mussolini were all frightened. Those who are aware and still do nothing constructive are among the most pathetic victims of the totalitarian process. The necessary shock troops and tools for creating the false contrapositive psychosocial basis of a fascist type pseudo-society were in short supply in this country prior to and during the process of the fascist takeover. There was little of this consciousness among the middle classes, so the first terror came from the specially formed and hired goons of the DuPonts and Rockefellers, the Black Legion, the Guardians of the Republic, the FBI. They destroyed the already disintegrating vanguard, leaving the degenerate elements of the working class as the only available mass. Class relations were slowly altered as a result of this action by the co-opted labor sectors. Government agents were sent to infiltrate scattered labor movements. The disguise was complete. The satisfaction of labor's short-term economic interests was made possible by the giant consumers market and the military complex. Ties were formed between rulers and labor leaders. The elites of the proletarian movement were compromised. A ruling class and its governing elites were centralized and were carefully co-opted. A fascist arrangement death and prison for all who object. Fascism in its final and secure state. It has happened here, and the only recourse is an appeal to arms. The cooperative state allows for no genuinely free political opposition. They only allow meaningless gatherings where they can plant more spies than participants. They feel secure in their ability to mold the opinion of a people interested only in wages. However, real revolutionary activity will draw panic-stricken gunfire or heart attacks. So what is to be done after a revolution has failed? After our enemies have created a conservative mass society based on meaningless electoral politics, spectator sports, and a 3% annual rise in purchasing power, strictly regulated to negate itself with a corresponding rise in the cost of living. What is to be done about an expertly, scientifically calculated, contrapositive mobilization of the entire society? What can we do with the people who have gone through the authoritarian process and come out sick to the core? There will be a fight. The fight will take place in the central cities. It'll be spearheaded by the Blacks of the lower class and their vanguard party, the Black Panther Party. Real union activity will eliminate the corporative ties between the regime, ruling class, and labor. People at the top will be removed, and the guy with the programmed mind will have no union boss to think for him. He will remain neutral or join us in our fight to liberate him. We will work this attack at the productive level indirectly by first building our central city communes, which will revolutionize the all too conservative Black labor. We will build these communes against all resistance, the pamphlet in one hand, the gun in the other. In Blacks, authoritarian traits are mainly the effects of terrorism and a lack of intellectual stimulation. They have been choosing the less dangerous and complicated mode of existence survival. All classes, all people are subject to the authoritarian syndrome. It requires only the proper set of eco-sociological circumstantial pressures to turn Blacks around and reawaken their revolutionary consciousness. We're hungry. Our overall task is to separate the people from the hated state. They must be made to realize that the interests of the state and the ruling class are one and the same. They must be taught to realize that the present political regime exists only to balance the productive forces within the society in favor of the ruling class. It is at the ruling class and the governing elites, including those of labor, that we must aim our bolts. The average working man will simply withdraw or watch with secret satisfaction or actively join in when we bring his union boss under attack. We Blacks have lived with terrorism for generations. It no longer affects us. It will intensify. We must prepare a counter-terrorism. A man can never be too repressed that he cannot strike back in some way, but it must begin now. The RAND Corporation does 80% of its work for the military-industrial intelligence communities complex. 750 or more colleges offer police science courses. 247 additional colleges offer associate degrees in law enforcement. 44 offer bachelor degrees. The National Guard numbers 390,000. The CIAD, Counterintelligence Analysis Detachment, the 113th Military Intelligence Group, is designed for the surveillance of private citizens. The police state isn't coming. It's here, glaring and threatening. How do we raise a new revolutionary consciousness against a system programmed against our old methods? Revolution is against the law. It will not be allowed. Not insignificant form. That makes the true revolutionary an outlaw, and the Black revolutionary a doomed man. As Blacks, we must function as the vanguard in any hostilities. We must use a new approach, unite and revolutionize the Black Central City Commune, and slowly provide the people with the incentive to fight by allowing them to create programs that will meet all of their social, political, and economic needs. We must fill the vacuums left by the established order. We must push the settlers off our land when they won't cooperate with the new communal life of our system. We must learn from the people. We must learn from the workers, the discipline they are so highly skilled in. In return, we must teach them the benefits of our revolutionary ideals. We must move Blacks to the forefront of a really productive assault on the outside enemy reactionary culture, not only on the production level, but in all significant areas of property relations. We must promote and support enforced rent strikes. Merchants must come over to our side or face the appropriation of their property for the commune. We must build a subsistence economy and a socio-political infrastructure so that we can become an example for all revolutionary people. Fascism has established itself in a most disguised and efficient manner in this country. It feels so secure that the leaders allow us the luxury of faint protest. Take protests too far, however, and they will show their other face. Doors will be kicked down in the night and machine gun fire and buckshot will become the medium of exchange. I am an extremist, a communist, not communistic, a communist, and I must be destroyed or I will join my comrades in the only communist party in this country, the Black Panther Party. I will give them my all, every dirty fighting trick in the annals of war. Nothing will defeat our revenge and nothing will countervail our march to victory. We come to our conclusion, the only historical recourse that is left to us. Freedom means warmth and protection against harsh exposure to the elements. It means food, not garbage. It means truth, harmony, and the social relations that spring from these. It means the best medical attention wherever it's needed. It means employment that is reasonable, that coincides with the individual necessities and feelings. We will have this freedom, even at the cost of total war. Dear John Gerasi, as you know, I'm in a unique political position. I have a very nearly closed future. And since I've always been inclined to get disturbed over organized injustice or terrorist practice against the innocents wherever, I can now say just about what I want. I've always done just about that, without fear of self-exposure. I can only be executed once. No matter what I do, they will always explain me away with the fact of my 11 years in prison and my supposed loss of contact with objective reality. So I rage on, aggressive and free. The action on April 6th. When I am denied or corrected, I always understand, but rage on. All on the principle that the ideal must be demonstrated, that the oppressed mentality must be taught by example to escape the myth, the hopes that repression can work against the collective consciousness of the commune, and to prove that ideals cannot be killed with violence. So I'm duty bound to take the occasion of your letter to respond with what an Irishman once termed, quotes, the sweet taste of sedition. I'll go straight back to our visit and the hour they allowed us to deal with all the years. I took your casual comment concerning the outlaw back to the cell with me, tooled with it a bit, and clarified it in my own hands. I have 100 related questions. I am alive and learning. Outlaws, of course, I thought. Revolution will not be tolerated. It is against the law and in the totalitarian corporative state. The revolutionary must certainly reconcile himself with one day becoming an outlaw. Then my thoughts turn to the oppressive contract in general. It's the nature of cancer to expand. You've seen a great deal of it firsthand, US expansionism since World War II. I've only studied it vicariously, but we see the same conclusions. Millions of outlaws in the Union of South Africa, Jordan, Indochina, and here. Summary executions, not of uniformed soldiers, but ordinary people. First, women and children in a ditch in Vietnam. Ultimately, executions in the civic centers of every lookalike country in this county in this country. And that's the principal contradiction of monopoly capital's oppressive contract. The system produces outlaws. It also breeds contempt for the oppressed. Accrual of contempt is its fundamental survival technique. This leads to the excesses and destroys any hope of peace eventually being worked out between the two antagonistic classes, the haves and the have-nots. Coexistence is impossible. Contempt breeds resistance, and resistance breeds brutality. The whole growing in spirals that must either end in the uneconomic destruction of the oppressed or the termination of oppression. History is clearly a long continuing of synthesizing elements. The imbalances of the oppressive contract, ideals so fundamentally contradictory, and forces so mutually exclusive can only result in the dissolution of the agents of that contradiction. The corollary of the contract is quite simply malignancy. It strikes first of all in the region of the brain. A search for a non-diseased mind throws one hard against one of the greatest historical biological calamities imaginable. Excuses can be made for some workers, blind defense for the system that is victimizing them, brainwashed by the National Advertising Council's portrait of the silent majority, as well off in comparison to the barbarian world. Their mindless behavior can also be explained by their ignorances of labor history. But even the nationalistic conditioning received in massive doses from birth cannot completely explain why man would turn against himself. Even the workers' short-term economic advantage is only a partial explanation. We must look for the root causes and the psychosocial effect of competitiveness and racism. The huge mass of blue-collar workers seem to be working totally against themselves in their support of a system owned and controlled by a tiny minority. Actually, their contradictory behavior is explained by feelings of loyalty to race, by their identification with the white hierarchy and their economic advantage, and by their economic advantage over the oppressed races. They may be oppressed themselves, but in return, they are allowed to oppress millions of others. The economic nature of racism is not simply an aside. Built-in physical features exclude Blacks from participation, exclude them forever. These features cannot be changed. It is the relationship that must change. Racism is a fundamental characteristic of monopoly capital. When the white, self-congratulatory racist complains that the Blacks are uncouth, unlettered, that our areas are run down, not maintained, that we dress with loud tastelessness, a thing they now also say about their own children, he forgets that he governs. He forgets that he built the schools that are inadequate, that he has abused his responsibility to use taxes paid by Blacks to improve their living conditions, that he manufactured the loud pants and pointed shoes that destroy and deform the feet. If we are not enough like him to suit his tastes, it's because he planned it that way. We were never intended to be part of this world. It's a silly contradiction for him or us to dwell on the subject of comparisons between the enemy culture and its creation, the subculture. The only way the exploiter can maintain his position is to create differences and maintain deformities. It is the sense of the finality of the exclusion from solid social economic participation that forces our youth away from the crippled family unit onto the streets. It causes the excessive importance of meaningless relationships and the prevalence of anti-communal behavior for which a psychosocial response to the loss of and longing for community. The diseased mind, it's slowly spreading throughout the oppressed organism. Even the magnificent savage, the mindless overman is dying from the almost total anemia. Where is the Black man, I see him inseparable from the Black female, but where is he now? How he has survived at all is almost beyond any rational explanation. Early, I understood the alternatives of the Black situation: assimilation, meaning acceptance of the oppressive contract, ossification or life below, beyond, outside of society, or revolution. But John, I admit to some confusion over the issue of white racism growing out of my experience in prison. My mind has vacillated between the historical references, African feudalism and African communalism, and I know that we Africans were the first communists. J. Edgar Hoover calls it primitive communism in one of the glossaries of his anti-people books. Dr. Du Bois dealt with it in the Philadelphia Negro, I think, I can't remember now, in a positive manner. So I never had any of the really serious hangups in accepting revolution. But I think for a while, I sincerely felt that Europeans were not capable of communistic unitarian behavior. I felt this, however, only briefly, since Unitarian progressive conduct seems to be a problem for all of us after hundreds of years of steadily centralizing capitalism, and in some areas after thousands of years of hierarchy. I've always understood that the new cultural nationalist attempts to return to the pre-slavery past of African feudalism can only leave the average Black man more uncertain and insecure than ever. It is difficult to understand why such negative academic and obscure exoticism exists when there are definite examples of historic contributions which could be used to analyze and give meaning to our present and our future. The commitment to total revolution must involve an analysis of both the economic motives and the psychosocial motives which perpetuate the oppressive contract. For the Black partisan, national structures are quite simply non-existent. A people without a collective consciousness that transcends national boundaries, freaks, Afro-Americans, Negroes, even Americans, without the sense of a larger community than their own group, can have no effect on history. Ultimately, they will simply be eliminated from the scene. Without the collective sense of community, without its movement, Bobby Hutton, the shootout on Central, August 7th, and institutions are survival projects that will now grow into infrastructure. We simply never will be an effective force. I believe that's where we decide to finish?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll turn it over now to Medusa.
Word. So much to think about, so much to grapple with, actually. I remember during the reading, I felt like an overwhelming like understanding that this is how it's gonna have to go, and like acceptance in my body and in my spirit that in order to like actually liberate the people, we would have to like, we have to accept some shit. So, but just going back into the section on 183, where he starts to talk at the end, and I want to say, I don't think it's the letter, but he said the economic nature is not simply aside built into physical features, exclude Blacks from participation. Hold on, I want to move down a little bit. He says this line, he forgets that he governs, like talking about like the way that it says the white self-congratulatory racist complains that the Blacks are uncouth, unlettered, that our areas are run down, not maintained, that we dress with loud tastelessness, a thing they now also say about their own children. But he forgets that he governs. It's like you forgot that you created this whole thing that we have. You forgot that we came over here not speaking anybody's language. And so just want to open it up to the group. What do y'all think about that? I think about this perception of our community, but also realizing that we learned from our oppressors.
I'll go. Yeah, I was reading that and I had a couple of feelings about it. On one hand, I was feeling like, who cares what he thinks? On the other hand, I realized that a lot of us do care what he thinks. That's part of the pathology of whiteness, is that we hold the esteem of white people as high and their opinions of us as high. And so I think that for those who have that happening in their psyche, that reminder of where the responsibility for the conditions are being created is important. And also, it's important for us to remember that as long as we are allowing them to have that authority over our lives, this is what it's going to look like. And so if we can see the validity of their assessment, even if we understand that the reasons behind that assessment, like if we can see that people in our community are unlettered or are not behaving in a way that is community oriented, and we recognize that this is coming from, like, regardless of them having these thoughts, that these realities are in place because of those who run the system and who govern, then that helps us to recognize they are not our friends, essentially. Like, they are not here to take good care of us, and that we have to do it. So it's another way of reminding us that we are the ones, we have to be the ones to keep us safe. And if we are not safe, it is because we are not doing it, because that is not what they're here to do. So that was kind of how I kind of like processed that part of the reading. And the other thing I just will mention in the end of the previous section, I definitely also appreciated the other ways that he described what we need to be doing. We must fill the vacuums left. We must push the settlers off our land. We must learn from the workers. We must learn from the people. We must move Blacks to the forefront. That whole process, we must promote and support enforced rent strikes. That process that he described there, I also appreciated that. And as we were reading it, was really processing how we do that, the whole idea of building the Black communes inside of the city centers. That was something that I also was really appreciating. And also just want to say thanks, Suzanne, for the good read.
Anybody else want to jump in there? It doesn't have to be about what I mentioned, but maybe some other parts stuck out to you.
Can I jump in? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
So we have a stack, just to mention. So we have Tag, Suzanne, and Jack on one stack.
Okay, sorry. Let's so I was trying to look for them, but I didn't see when they had came in. So we got a Tag on stack.
Okay, much appreciated. Yeah, real quick, I would just want to build off of those comments by noting that part of what I was thinking about in reading this and hearing it today was who are some of the heads and thinkers and writers and revolutionaries that are continuing, this work that George Jackson's doing, particularly in thinking about, the context in which he's writing and talking about infrastructure building, et cetera, and in that the particular moment where he was at that time, and the stage of progress that the Black Panther Party was at, et cetera. And so I was just reminded of heads like Kevin Rashid Johnson, the many currently incarcerated revolutionaries that are continuing to build off of that work, and just wondering what are some texts that we can connect this with, that are advancing this analysis, as the historical context shifts. So just some kind of open questions that were brought to mind.
Looking for who's next on stack. Is that you, Suzanne?
I think so, but I'm not
sure. Awesome.
A couple of things. I'm sorry, I can't immediately. Well, just to follow up on Tad's recent just comments, I think the fact that I'm so thrilled about rereading Blood in My Eye and recapturing, or maybe for the first time, really understanding the depth of his revolutionary perspective and what a leader he really was and what a leader he is 50 years later. To read this, to read him, it blows my mind. And I really want to thank the organizers of this workshop, whatever we call it, for doing this, because I think we need to spread the word of George Jackson's message to the movement, to the progressive movement. I think he has been very much underestimated and forgotten. And when you asked, Tad, you know, who are the people we should be reading? George Jackson, obviously. And, you know, even the reference, the wonderful definition of the real Communist Party being the Black Panther Party is wonderful, is a challenge to all the stereotypes on the left about who the Communist Party is and what the leadership is. And the other thing is, I keep being struck, partly because of these particular times in the last couple of years and the whole focus on Trump as a fascist and the fascist movement in this country, that the sentence on page 177, that second paragraph, which reads, "Fascism has established itself in a most disguised and efficient manner in this country." And I can't tell you how many times I've heard leftists, particularly white leftists, because I was in some discussion where Glenn Ford really challenged this, saying, this is not, this, I've heard this the last 5 years at least, this is not fascism, because if it were fascism, we wouldn't be able to meet here as we're meeting. So this is like a group of 20 people sitting and talking and meeting, and people are impressed that we have that freedom and therefore take the position that we don't have fascism. And what an absurd, ridiculous position. And it's a testimony really to that fascism has been established in this country in such a disguised and efficient manner so that people, even people who consider themselves leftists and radicals, don't know we're living under fascism.
Awesome. Jacqueline, you want to jump in?
Yeah, the person who talked before Suzanne, I mentioned about reading. I think if you read Franz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, it goes right along with a lot of what he's saying. Franz Fanon was a psychologist and quite, it's not outspoken, but very clear about the settlers and who we are, and even what our own psychology is to dealing with them. So I think if you do get a chance to read Wretched of the Earth, and I hope that that will become a staple, because that was a staple for the Black Panthers and the Young Lords and many other revolutionaries. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, everybody. Hey, I had to get ready to hop off, but I just wanted to, one, thank everybody for being in the space and sharing out. And then also one of the lines that you said was, "So I rage on, aggressive and free." And so just, you know, reflecting on that as a quote and like as a life, like mantra, rather, just aggressive and free. I thought that was amazing. So I'm going to hop off because I have another call to hop on. Peace and power to you all.
Thanks, Medusa, for
Peace and power.
Your facilitation. Raphael also had to leave. I still want to give some space for people who have some things that they wanted to say. As it relates to reading, I would like to mention I wouldn't say that the Black Agenda Report writes this same, you know, like there's the practical element of George's writing that I think is really, really particular. There's like the laying down of like actual like practices that we can embody. that said, I think that one thing that Black Agenda Report is a great resource for is like a solid analysis of the things that are happening in the current time, so that you can take like these kinds of revolutionary principles and be able to have a analysis of today that connects with these principles and these practices when it comes to understanding what's happening, responding to things that are going on, or educating larger community about what's happening. So I want to mention Black Agenda Report as a resource for that, a great resource for that. That was co-founded by our new recent ancestor, Glenn Ford, who was very dedicated to understanding the importance of us having these kinds of analytical tools in place, so much so that on his deathbed, he continued to work until the day that he died. So I definitely think that that's a great resource for us. And want to give space for anybody else who had any additional thoughts about the pages that we read today. You know, I mentioned the portions that I talked about, wondering also if anybody else, if that resonated with anyone else, if anybody actually had any like concrete thoughts about like actions or activities, this push around the communes, what people think about that idea and about activating around that idea. Does anybody have any like thoughts around that? Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Can you repeat the last part? I didn't hear it.
I was saying this concept that he's repeated about building communes in the city centers, and the need or the importance of doing that as a part of the revolutionary strategy. I was wondering if anybody had any thoughts about that, or how people responded to that, if anybody felt like drawn to that particular approach. Just curious. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
And so my question is not against him at all. I mean, I'm not clear how that would be done. And what I mean, it's not any economic thing, but we are not a cohesive people. Okay, we're not one unit. We are so divided among ourselves, so conflicted on many levels. So I'm very curious how this would all even begin to happen, if it's even possible in my lifetime, your lifetime. Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective, and it may be a reflection amongst other things of like our differences in location. I know that, for example, my first thinking about this is that one thing that would be really important would be food production and our ability to ensure that we can feed the community without having to turn to their system-based resources. And here in the city of Philadelphia, there's so much urban gardening happening, so many gardens that are being built for the community where food is being distributed to community members. And I know that this is happening in other communities as well. I remember seeing about a massive vertical garden that was being built in Atlanta. I'm not gonna say massive. I know about a vertical garden or some sort of cooperative gardening that was being developed in Atlanta that I had read about, and I know that that's happening. I remember here in Philadelphia, we had the protest encampment around housing and the housing situation here in Philadelphia, and the way that that was run. There was a major kitchen. Anyone was able to eat at the kitchen. People who did not live at the camp but needed food were able to go to the kitchen. And there was a lot that was donated there, which is different when it's donation required, like when it has to be built on donation or needs donations to run. That's not fully self-sufficient, but there was still like, housing provided. I mean, it wasn't housing, but like this was a tent city, but they ensured that they provided those kinds of things for all the people. And so I also like the time I spent at Standing Rock, and that's not our community, but seeing examples of ways that these things can exist and being able to like massage them in order to make them be more self-sufficient or make them appropriate. I think there are examples. that I've seen in a few different communities, not specifically in New York where you are at this point, but those are some things that I've seen. And I think that my thinking about it was that food and housing would be the two first most important things that would need to be established or created for the community. And in that way, it can exist in a few ways. And another way that housing happens here is that they take over houses that are owned by the government. But in Oakland, you know, they had that big thing with the moms who took over a private developer's home. If there were people who were ready to come together and think through some of these things, I think that there is a lot of possibility and a lot of things that are already in place that could be built on and transformed with a raised revolutionary consciousness, as George puts it, in order to actually begin to build a commune here in Philly. I feel like that has possibility. Anybody else have any thoughts?
It did, but what's interesting, it's almost like the churches, I'm not promoting that, but somehow they're able to galvanize their worshipers, I guess, to have all kinds of housing programs and food programs. You see these churches that are buying land, building apartments, houses, you know, so yeah, it's a lot to think about. I think it's possible. I also see from another group I know of in New York that they keep everything very quiet, but they're a group, but they're very wide at what they do. Does that make sense? You know, they don't it's not so much I broadcast it, but when it's ready, when elements of it are ready is when they start to release things to the people so that there's no interference at all.
Yeah. When you mentioned the churches, it made me think about Pastor Keith, who was at the event on Monday in support of Maroon, who was speaking about how he himself really is about revolution, and how a lot of the pastors and a lot of the ministers are actually operating on behalf of the state. And, you know, but that he putting out a call for there to be more pastors that join the movement. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because yes, they do have this ability to galvanize their worshipers. And then, but are they doing it in a way that is reform oriented, that actually reinforces the current system, or are they galvanizing them with revolutionary understandings in order to free the people in the same way that you know, their follower was revolutionary and radical in his day and time. So yeah, that's an interesting comment, Jacqueline. Does anyone else have any thoughts they wanted to share in relation to any of the things that have come up or anything else in the readings? Go ahead, Tad.
Yeah, so, well, first, this would be just to clarify as far as the comment about readings. I absolutely appreciate, oh, I meant to turn that down. I absolutely appreciate the other texts that were mentioned, you know, which are also, to me, some of the most, you know, inexhaustibly useful texts. Wretched of the Earth, Black Agenda Report, you know, has archives going back years, you know, of crucial analysis. So just to be clear, none of this was meant to in any way overlook the invaluable nature of what G. Jackson has set down here. It was really in the interest of, you know, you mentioned before we started reading, looking to build forward, and, you know, how might we move from here, from the analysis that we're sharing. And having, you know, peeped out this text before, you know, with study group and individually, I just couldn't help but think, you know, how if let's say if we were to put together, you know, a linear sequential look of, you know, here's blood in my eye, and then from here, you know, this kind of analysis is being further advanced, within that next decade, when Field Marshal Jackson's no longer writing, and then the following decade, et cetera, for this same type of clarity and aims toward praxis that George Jackson lays out for us here. He emphasizes synthesis, and his historical synthesis. And so just in keeping with and looking to advance the project that he has laid down and remains utterly vital to this day, how do we see that intellectual lineage concretely? Who are those thinkers and revolutionaries that are continuing that forward in an unbroken path, so to speak? So it's just a set of thoughts that continuing to have, and perhaps as we continue to do study collectively, I'm sure there are many other works that heads have a grasp on that we could build off of with. But I know inside revolutionaries, again, like Kevin Rashid Johnson, Mumia Abu-Jamal, of course, Relson Maroon Schultz, of course, so many of these heads that have been continuing to have that same resistance-oriented, sharp analysis, to this day. But then also just quickly on the oppressive contract, which I believe is the title of the chapter, and he goes back to, this oppressive contract. It seems to me that is in part to blame for precisely, what you were speaking of, Sister Wade, as far as heads being, so detached, and that being, a major barrier to building the kinds of infrastructure out of survival programs that George Jackson is speaking to here. So I think that all that you laid out, Sister Yane, is precisely the kind of work that he's pointing toward. He even, provides one of the clearest definitions of freedom, that I've really ever encountered. I'm always struck by just how clear freedom is defined by George Jackson, and how useful that is to just keep in mind when we're thinking about what we're fighting for. But this question of the oppressive contract and how it detaches us from ourselves, detaches us from our history, and from our collective ability to struggle. So just this quote on 185, he writes, "A people without a collective consciousness that transcends national boundaries, without the sense of a larger community than their own group, can have no effect on history." And it seems to me that that's the kind of condition that you were pointing toward, Sister Wade, which we have at all costs to avoid and resist against this sense that we are, these just kind of, I don't know, detached and insular parts that have no collective history and no connective tissue to much larger forces that of struggle and of resistance.
I just want to add one thing. Like, I don't know how many of you agree with any of this. So I'm working on my second master's, soon to be my PhD. Okay, what I noticed is that there are sororities and fraternities. I'm talking about the Black ones. Okay. Same thing with the church, Black churches. What I'm saying is these institutions, separate from some of the negative things that they may do, they work as a network. They support each other. It's like you're part of the club, and what I'm trying to say is this. There are institutions already that exist that are not revolutionary at all, but are Black run. And they run well within their world, okay? And it's sort of like, I'm not saying use them as a model, but how do you get what you're doing working it's like getting an alliance, so that you can all work together. You're really for the same thing,
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. I think that there's definitely maybe some lessons that we can take from a range of different locations. I think that, like the example of these like sororities and even nowadays, these mega churches, they have really shifted what they are built in alignment with the oppressive contract. And working to move people up the working class ladder within the context of the system, and training people to operate and support each other in that endeavor. And we can build brotherhoods and sisterhoods that are guided by a revolutionary consciousness in a similar kind of way. I'm just kind of like, it would be interesting to establish a radical Black sorority fraternity force within these spaces that interrupts the programming that comes in these universities by bringing in this kind of radical consciousness and bringing people out when they graduate, that they actually graduate as, from these universities with that kind of revolutionary mindset, understanding, and lessons that they should be getting and that they are not being exposed to. So that, I think, could be a very cool and interesting idea, Jacqueline. It's now 1:18. And so we do aim, even though it's a power hour, to extend, maybe another 15 hours longer. We are still considering for Friday to have a 2-hour session. I see Suzanne is open to that idea, wondering just of the people who are here, tag Jacqueline and Al, if you all would be down for a 2-hour session on Friday. Jacqueline, you would be. Al, what do you think? And tag, what do you think?
Are we actually, I might be in Philadelphia that day. Are we actually meeting?
I would be open to hosting a few people here, and then having, and still also having the Zoom for people who want to do both. I would be open to something like that, and we could figure that out tomorrow. We have 10 pages left tomorrow, including the afterword, and actually 9 pages, I think, including the afterword. And so we can also figure some of that out tomorrow. I just want to remind y'all that we put this space together, but I had not read Blood in My Eye, so I could not have a plan myself as one of the facilitators for what was going to happen before I read the book. I read this together with you all. So this is a collective experience, and we can collectively be making these decisions for what we're going to be doing moving forward. So just want to be clear about that. But yeah, I would be open to doing that, and I'm interested in maybe tomorrow us kind of through some of the things that we will want to really dive in on Friday. Do that as well.
Friday, I won't be available. I got to take my daughter back to college.
Oh, okay.
So I'm gonna try to tune in on the road, but I don't know how that's gonna go.
Yeah. Okay, you got to do that.
But I will get to finish the book tomorrow though. So.
Yeah. Tag, I saw that you unmuted. Did you have some commentary?
Just wanted to check, would that be, so that would be noon to 2 on Friday?
Yeah.
No doubt. So yeah, I should be with that.
All right, cool. So we're gonna plan towards that, and I'll send an email out to the whole community through Eventbrite so that people can still be welcome to join us for that. And I'll see y'all tomorrow. All right. Great session as usual.